I walked in on Death. I didn't mean to. To be honest, had I known, I may have turned aside or hesitated, found some excuse not to go in the room. But I'd been sent for a cold compress for Dave's head. And in the current situation, and what with the do it now, idiot tone my wife had used, I was in a bit of a hurry. To be fair, she did think it was my fault Dave needed the compress. To be extra fair, Dave should have known not to trust me when I asked him to help me open a can marked mixed nuts. I'd gotten him with the rubber vomit, the fake dog poop, the fly in the plastic ice cube, the whoopee cushion, and the joy buzzer. Twice. And that was just this weekend. My Uncle Dave, world's most gullible man. But seriously, he should have learned at least a little caution by that point in the visit, shouldn't he? I mean, the can just said mixed nuts. No brand name, no list of ingredients on the side, no nothing. He definitely shouldn't have been so surprised when the springy snake popped out of the can that he went over backward and thumped his head a good one on the floor like he did. That was just overreacting. But Lisa had used that tone, so I was hurrying. Here you go, I said, bustling through the door. This ought to. Death sat by the bed. We both froze just for a second, making that awkward eye contact, or whatever you call it when one party doesn't actually have eyes, that tends to happen when you suddenly discover you're not as alone as you'd thought. We each looked away at the same moment, Death gazing out the window with uncomfortably false nonchalance, while I put my hand on my hip and held the other aloft, trying to remember the name of the thing I'd just carried into the room. Compress, I shouted. Beg pardon, Death said, quickly, as if I'd startled him by speaking, and in a voice that made Sir Ian McKellen sound just a little bit like Mickey Mouse. Compress, I repeated. My wife sent me to fetch a compress for Dave's head, but I guess it's too, well... Eye sockets filled with the deepest night stared at me from beneath the motionless black cowl as Death waited for me to say it, not helping me in the least. Late? I finished. We stared at each other again, me still holding the compress up like I was showing it off, Death holding Dave's fleshy hand casually in his bony one. Then, a single came from the skull, a neat trick without a tongue, and the hood rotated smoothly as Death looked out the window again. Well, he intoned, and if anyone ever had the pipes for intoning, this was the guy. This is awkward. You're telling me, I said. He glanced over, indicating the door with a single extended phalange. I don't suppose you could just walk back out and forget this ever happened? He sounded both mournful and hopeful. Not really the kind of thing you just forget. No, of course not. Silly of me to suggest it. So, I said. So, Death agreed. A few heartbeats passed in the silence. All of them mine, apparently. I pointed to Dave. Heart attack? Yes. I guess the snake in the can was a bit much then? Yes. We let the silence grow a while. Suddenly, Death burst out, Look, I'm not used to doing this in front of anyone. Not, visibly. It's a bit uncomfortable, you standing there with that compress and everything. Would you mind giving me a moment alone? I challenge you, I said. Death blinked. Well, not blinked as such, without having eyes or eyelids, but I got the sense for a moment he was trying to very hard. Beg pardon? I challenge you, I said again, slowly. Even I couldn't believe I'd said it the first time, since the idea was still forming while I was saying it again. I've read about you. Hercules wrestled you for someone or other, right? And Granny Weatherwax played cards for a child. I read that one, too. The first is a myth, and the second happened in a popular novel, Death said flatly. They were both fiction. I flipped a finger between the two of us. And this is real? Seriously? Point taken. He sighed, hollowly. You wish to challenge me for Dave? Yup. And what do you bet? Me, I said. Double or nothing. You win, you take both of us. You lose, you walk away empty-handed. The skull nodded solemnly. Done. What is the game? I don't know. But not wrestling. I have a bad back. And not cards, Death insisted. That weatherwax woman soured me on cards. Well, this is Dave's room. I don't know what else he'd have in here. I scratched my chin, then snapped my fingers. I got it. We'll flip a coin. A coin? Sure. One flip, winner take all. Straight chance, no advantage to either side. I shrugged. Best I can come up with on short notice. There was a hollow rasp as Death scratched his own chin. I like it. I tend to be unskilled at human games anyway. Done, I said. And since I challenged you, you get to choose heads or tails for yourself. I choose heads. Heads, you win, I agreed, stuffing my left hand in my pocket and coming out with a quarter. Tails, I win. Ready? The dark figure sat straighter in his chair. Ready. I flipped the coin, sending it high in the air, spinning end over end. Caught it and slapped it down on my wrist. Ready? Death stared with a hollow-socketed intensity. Ready. I slipped my hand aside. Damn, said Death, sounding like Ian McKellen with a chest cold at the bottom of a well. In hell. Ha, I said. Looks like you're going away empty-handed. But Death was gone. He didn't fade away or walk through a wall or anything, and I didn't actually see him disappear, but it was suddenly like he'd never been there at all. Christ, that was close, shouted Dave, sitting up so fast I actually fell down and hit my head. But with talking to Death and all, I'd kind of forgotten he was even there. I got up and pressed a compress to my own head. You heard all that? Of course, said Dave. I was right here. Double or nothing on a single coin toss? That's the ballsiest thing I've ever seen. Yep, I said. That's me. Nothing but balls. Dave's eyes went unfocused for a moment in thought. Then, two-headed coin? Nope, I grinned. Two-tailed. The two-headed one's in my right pocket. I should have known. He shook his head. You and your practical jokes. Hey, one of those practical jokes just saved your life. You wouldn't have had to save my life if... I spun on my heel and pushed through the door. I'll go tell everyone you're okay, shall I? I'd crossed the hall and gotten to the top of the stairs, compress still firm against the base of my skull, when I heard the cry behind me. I reflexively spun toward the sound, and my foot shot out from beneath me. I sailed out over the steps, feet rising, head falling, and landed at the foot of the stairs on the back of my neck. I was just contemplating the ugly crack my neck had made and the strange lack of pain when a clearly stepped-on banana peel fluttered down to land on my chest. My goodness, said Ian McKellen's vocal stunt double. That looked terrible. Let me help you up. Death looked very tall from where I lay on the floor, shoving the last bit of banana into his mouth before leaning down to offer me a skeletal hand. You know, he said, chewing, and I wondered how the banana didn't just fall out, but with his lack of lips, but he must have had lots of practice. That sense of humor of yours is going to get someone killed someday. Whoops, he pointed down. Too late. My gaze followed his pointing digit to my body, lying at my translucent feet. Again, he said, and I looked up to find my slightly transparent but very angry-looking Dave standing beside him. Whoops. We were halfway down the tunnel to the light before I realized that chest-rattling rumble I was hearing was Death. Laughing.